The Galactic Defense Academy's crystalline towers stretched toward the violet sky of Proxima Centauri b, their surfaces reflecting the perpetual twilight of the tidally locked planet. Inside the Academy's quantum simulation chamber, Captain Niamh O'Sullivan stood out among the assembled alien recruits, not for her height or appearance, but for the conspicuous absence of neural augmentation devices that adorned her fellow trainees. The chamber's chief instructor, Grand Marshal Zeichstall, a being composed of shifting geometric patterns and pulsing light, regarded the human with barely concealed skepticism. "Captain O'Sullivan, you insist on participating without the standard neural interface. The quantum simulations are calibrated for enhanced cognitive processing." Niamh's green eyes sparkled with determination as she adjusted her standard-issue training suit. "With respect, Marshal, I'll rely on human intuition for this exercise." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled alien cadets, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching in what she had learned to recognize as amusement or disdain. The simulation chamber hummed to life, its walls dissolving into a perfect recreation of an unstable neutron star's magnetic field. The challenge was deceptively simple: navigate through the chaotic magnetic streams to reach the rescue beacon on the other side. The alien cadets, with their neural interfaces, could process the complex mathematical models in real time, plotting optimal trajectories through the lethal magnetic currents. As the first alien cadet stepped forward, a towering axiomite named Vrexther, whose crystalline body sparkled with embedded quantum processors, Niamh studied the shifting patterns of energy with naked eyes. Where her colleagues saw equations and probability matrices, she saw patterns, like reading the surface of a stormy ocean. Vrexther moved with mechanical precision, his path a perfect execution of calculated probabilities. He made it halfway before a sudden magnetic surge caught him off guard, forcing him to retreat. Two more alien cadets attempted the crossing, each armed with increasingly complex predictive algorithms. Each failed. When Niamh's turn came, she didn't hesitate. Instead of fighting against the magnetic currents, she moved with them, like a surfer reading the waves. Her movements weren't based on calculations, but on the subtle cues she'd observed. The way energy particles scattered before a surge, the faint oscillation in the field's color preceding a shift. "Impossible," muttered Vrexther as Niamh danced through the chaos. Where the aliens saw danger in unpredictability, she saw opportunity. Each magnetic surge became a slingshot, each turbulent eddy a pathway. From his observation platform, Marshal Zeichstall's geometric patterns shifted rapidly, the equivalent of raised eyebrows in his species. The human wasn't just surviving. She was thriving in the chaos, her movements exhibiting a grace that no algorithm could replicate. As Niamh reached the rescue beacon, the simulation dissolved, leaving her standing calmly in the chamber. The alien cadets' neural interfaces were still processing what they'd witnessed. How had a non-augmented human outperformed their advanced systems? "Perhaps," Marshal Zeichstall's voice resonated through the chamber, "there are some things that cannot be reduced to equations. Captain O'Sullivan, would you explain your methodology?" Niamh smiled, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. "There was no methodology, Marshal. The magnetic field wasn't just a problem to solve, it was alive like a dance partner. You can't calculate every step in a dance. Sometimes you have to feel the rhythm." The Marshal's form pulsed with intense light as he processed this concept. "But without predictive modeling, how could you anticipate the field's behavior?" "Humans have been reading natural patterns since we first looked up at the stars," Niamh explained. "We learned to predict weather by watching clouds, to navigate oceans by reading winds. We don't always need computers to tell us which way the wind blows." The chamber erupted in discussion, neural interfaces struggling to compute this new paradigm. Marshal Zeichstall raised an appendage for silence. "It seems," he announced, "that we have much to learn from our human colleagues. Perhaps efficiency isn't always found in faster processors, but in the ability to embrace chaos itself." As the assembly dispersed, Niamh caught Vrexther studying her with his crystalline sensors. "Your success defies logical explanation," he stated. "That's humanity's secret weapon," she replied with a wink. We've never let logic get in the way of doing the impossible. The incident would become legend in the Academy's halls, the day a human proved that sometimes the best computer is no computer at all. For Niam O'Sullivan, it was just another Tuesday. After all, humanity hadn't reached the stars by following someone else's rulebook. The emergency alert blared through the Galactic Defense Academy's quantum engineering bay, its piercing tone cutting through the usual hum of advanced machinery. Engineer Marcus Patel's hands moved swiftly across his workstation, his dark eyes scanning multiple holographic displays showing critical failures throughout the Academy's antimatter containment system. All personnel evacuate immediately, the AI system announced in 17 different languages. Containment breach imminent in sectors 7 through 12. Marcus ignored the evacuation order, his mind already racing through possibilities that the Academy's advanced systems hadn't considered. Around him, his alien colleagues were following standard emergency protocols, their neural interfaces synchronizing with the Academy's evacuation procedures. Chief Engineer Kilks, a towering mechanoid with rotating optical sensors, paused at Marcus's station. Engineer Patel, the protocols are clear. This facility will be automatically sealed in 3 minutes. Chief, those protocols will kill everyone trapped in the affected sectors, Marcus replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The containment system isn't failing, it's adapting. Look at these energy signatures. Kilks's optical sensors whirred as they focused on Marcus's displays. Impossible. The containment field matrix is degrading according to all standard metrics. Standard metrics that were designed for standard situations, Marcus countered. But this isn't standard. The antimatter is resonating with something else, creating a new kind of stable pattern. We don't need to shut it down, we need to work with it. The mechanoid's internal processors hummed with increased activity. Working with an antimatter containment breach violates every safety protocol established in the last 3 centuries of galactic engineering. Marcus stood up, his expression intense. Then it's time to write new protocols. Those trapped personnel don't have time for us to follow a rulebook. Sometimes you have to trust what you see, not what you're told to expect. Without waiting for approval, Marcus initiated a series of commands that made Kilks's optical sensors dilate in alarm. Instead of strengthening the containment fields, he was modulating them, creating a harmonic resonance with the unstable antimatter patterns. This is unprecedented, Kilks warned. The probability of catastrophic failure isn't as high as the certainty of losing those people if we do nothing, Marcus interrupted. Humanity learned long ago that sometimes you have to break the rules to save lives. The antimatter containment fields flickered, their usually rigid geometric patterns flowing into new configurations that defied conventional engineering principles. Marcus's modifications were creating something that had never been seen before, a dynamic containment system that adapted to the antimatter's quantum state instead of forcing it into submission. Remarkable, Kilks observed as the energy readings stabilized. You're using the containment field's own instability as a stabilizing factor. The mathematical implications are. Save the math for later, Marcus said, already moving toward the affected sectors. We need to get those people out while the field is stable. Together, human and mechanoid raced through the facility's corridors, passing emergency bulkheads that should have been sealed. They found the trapped personnel, a mix of cadets and instructors from various species, huddled in a research lab, surrounded by the shimmering patterns of Marcus's modified containment field. As they led the evacuation, Kilks's processors were still trying to calculate the probability of what they'd just witnessed. Your solution should not have worked, Engineer Patel. It defied centuries of established principles. Marcus helped a shaken crystalline cadet to their feet. That's because principles aren't the same as truth, Chief. The universe doesn't care about our rules, it cares about what works. Humanity learned that lesson through countless disasters and near misses. We survived not by following protocols, but by adapting when those protocols failed. The rescued personnel were safely evacuated, and Marcus's containment solution was not only stable, but showed promise as a new standard for antimatter storage. The Academy's engineering division would spend months studying the incident, trying to understand how a human engineer with no neural augmentation had seen a solution that countless AI systems had missed. Later in the Academy's observation deck, Marcus stood with Kilks, watching the sunset paint the crystalline towers in shades of purple and gold. "You know," Marcus said, "the first human engineers didn't have manuals or protocols. They had curiosity and necessity. Sometimes I think we've become too reliant on being told what's possible and what isn't." Kilks's optical sensors studied the human with new appreciation. "Perhaps," the mechanoid admitted, "there is wisdom in maintaining some distance from absolute certainty. Your species' ability to question established truths is unsettling but undeniably effective." Marcus smiled. "Unsettling is what we do best, Chief. It's how we progress. After all, every breakthrough in history started with someone saying, 'What if we tried something different?'" Lieutenant Jun Nakamura stood at the observation deck of Joint Outpost Epsilon, watching strange light patterns dance across the quantum anomaly field that surrounded their remote station. The phenomenon had appeared 3 days ago, defying all known laws of physics and rendering most of their advanced alien technology useless. The outpost's commanding officer, High Commander Zeltrix of the Quantum Collective, floated nearby, her energy-based form fluctuating with concern. "Our quantum processors cannot establish stable computational patterns within the anomaly field. Without reliable predictions, we are effectively blind." Jun nodded, his calm demeanor masking intense concentration. Unlike his alien colleagues, who relied heavily on quantum computation for decision-making, he had spent the last 3 days watching the anomaly field with nothing but his natural senses and an old-fashioned paper notebook. "Commander," he said, sketching another pattern in his notebook, "I think we're approaching this the wrong way. We're trying to predict the anomaly's behavior, but what if it's not random at all? What if it's responding to us?" Zeltrix's energy pattern shifted to indicate skepticism. "Impossible. Our sensors detect no signs of consciousness or intelligent design within the phenomenon." "Maybe we're looking for the wrong signs," Jun suggested. He pulled up a holographic display showing the station's power consumption records. "Look at these patterns. Every time we increase power to our sensors, the anomaly's behavior becomes more erratic. When we power down, it stabilizes." The commander's form pulsed with surprise as she processed this observation. "But our sensors detected no correlation." "Because they were part of the interaction," Jun interrupted gently. "It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Sometimes you need to step back to see the whole picture." Before Zeltrix could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The anomaly field had begun to pulse with increasing intensity, and the station's quantum shields were failing. Alien crew members rushed to their stations, their neural interfaces struggling to process the cascade of conflicting data. Jun closed his notebook and straightened his uniform. "Commander, request permission to try something unconventional." "Our protocols will get us all killed," Jun finished. "Sometimes the best technology is no technology at all." After a moment of hesitation, Zeltrix's form flickered in assent. "Proceed, Lieutenant." Jun moved quickly to the station's main power control center. Instead of trying to reinforce their defenses, he began systematically shutting down the station's advanced systems, leaving only basic life support active. His alien colleagues watched in disbelief as he disabled their quantum shields, sensor arrays, and computational networks. "Lieutenant Nakamura," called out First Technical Officer Vrix, his crystalline form vibrating with alarm. "Without our defensive systems, the anomaly field will." The officer fell silent as the anomaly's violent pulses began to slow. As each system shut down, the field's patterns became more regular, almost peaceful. Jun watched with quiet satisfaction as his hypothesis proved correct. "It's like meeting a stranger," he explained to his stunned colleagues. "Sometimes you have to put down your weapons and trust in basic intuition. Our ancestors learned to read natural phenomena long before we had quantum computers. They survived by adapting to nature rather than trying to control it. Zeltrix moved closer to the observation window, her energy form rippling with fascination. The anomaly! It's communicating. Jun nodded. In its own way, our technology was like shouting at it, demanding answers in a language it doesn't speak. Sometimes you need to be quiet to hear what the universe is trying to tell you. Over the next few hours, Jun worked with the alien crew to establish a new protocol for studying the anomaly field. Instead of relying on intensive scanning and computation, they developed a more passive approach, using minimal technology and maximum observation. The result was a breakthrough in understanding quantum phenomena that would revolutionize space exploration. Your species continues to surprise us, Zeltrix commented later, as they watched the now peaceful anomaly field shimmer like an aurora. We built our civilization on the principle that advanced technology is the answer to every challenge. Yet here you are, solving problems by choosing not to use technology at all. Jun smiled, adding one final sketch to his notebook. That's because humanity's greatest technology isn't in our computers or our machines, Commander. It's in our ability to adapt, to think differently, to see patterns where others see chaos. We learned long ago that sometimes the most advanced solution is the simplest one. The incident at Outpost Epsilon would later be studied at the Academy as a prime example of human adaptive thinking. It proved that in a universe of endless possibilities, sometimes the best way forward is to step back and see with new eyes. The Quantum Navigation Center of the Galactic Fleet buzzed with nervous energy as Dr. Aisha Rahman adjusted the settings on her experimental navigation console. The massive holographic display before her showed thousands of possible quantum pathways through a newly discovered spatial anomaly, a maze of shifting probability corridors that had already claimed 3 advanced AI-piloted ships. Fleet Admiral Zonax, their tentacles rippling with barely contained anxiety, loomed over her shoulder. Dr. Rahman, every quantum AI in the fleet has failed to plot a safe course through this anomaly. What makes you think human intuition can succeed where our most advanced systems have failed? Aisha's fingers danced across the holographic controls, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling quantum paths. Because, Admiral, your AIs are looking for perfect solutions. They're trying to calculate every possible quantum state, every probability variance. But sometimes, the perfect path is the one you feel rather than calculate. The Admiral's bioluminescent spots pulsed with skepticism. This is not some simple navigation challenge. The quantum states within the anomaly shift faster than even our most advanced processors can track. We've lost 3 ships. 3 ships that were following perfect mathematical solutions, Aisha interrupted, her voice firm. But quantum space isn't just math. It's music, it's art, it's dance. And humans have been finding their way through chaos long before we had computers to tell us how. The rescue mission couldn't wait any longer. A civilian research vessel was trapped within the anomaly, its crew slowly running out of life support. Every minute spent debating reduced their chances of survival. Aisha initiated her unconventional navigation program. Instead of trying to predict every quantum possibility, her system translated the quantum fluctuations into patterns of light, sound, and movement. A symphony of data that could be interpreted by human senses rather than pure computation. This is highly irregular, muttered Senior Navigator Kelvy, their cybernetic implants whirring as they processed Aisha's approach. You're reducing complex quantum calculations to sensory input. I'm translating it into a language humans understand instinctively, Aisha explained as she calibrated the final settings. Our brains are quantum computers too, we just process information differently. The rescue ship, Quantum Dreamer, hummed to life around them. Aisha had specifically requested this vessel for its hybrid human AI systems, capable of responding to intuitive commands as well as computational inputs. As she settled into the navigator's chair, the holographic display transformed the quantum maze into a dancing aurora of light and sound. Beginning approach, she announced, her hands resting lightly on the control surfaces. Where traditional quantum navigation would have required constant calculations and course corrections, Aisha let her instincts guide her. The quantum fluctuations became a melody she could follow, the probability shifts a dance she could anticipate. Admiral Zonax and the alien crew watched in astonishment as the quantum dreamer wove through the anomaly's chaotic patterns. Where AI systems had seen impossible calculations, Aisha saw rhythms and flows. She guided the ship not through perfect mathematical paths, but through the spaces between possibilities. Impossible, Kelvy whispered as they passed through particularly dense quantum turbulence. She's not even using the standard navigation protocols. Because protocols assume the universe follows rules, Aisha responded, her concentration never wavering. But quantum space is more like a river. You don't control it, you flow with it. They found the stranded research vessel near the heart of the anomaly, its AI systems completely overwhelmed by the quantum chaos. As they initiated rescue procedures, Aisha noticed something in the pattern of quantum fluctuations around them. The anomaly, she said suddenly, it's not random at all. It's a quantum echo of something bigger, like ripples in a pond. We're not seeing chaos. We're seeing the aftermath of some cosmic event we don't yet understand. Admiral Zonax's tentacles writhed with interest. You determined this without quantum analysis. I felt it, Aisha explained. The patterns have a source, a rhythm. Your AIs couldn't see it because they were too focused on the individual quantum states rather than the overall flow. As they guided both ships back to safety, Aisha's discovery sparked a revolution in quantum navigation theory. Her approach, combining human intuition with quantum technology, would open up new possibilities for exploring the universe's most challenging regions. Later in the quiet of her research lab, Aisha reviewed the data from their journey. You know, she told her alien colleagues, humans have always been explorers. Before we had stars to guide us, before we had maps or compasses, we had something just as powerful, our ability to see patterns in chaos, to feel our way through the unknown. Maybe that's not primitive thinking. Maybe it's the most advanced navigation system of all. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Defense Academy fell silent as Chief Tactical Officer Diego Montoya stepped onto the presentation platform. The chamber's curved walls displayed real-time data from 1,000 worlds, but today all attention focused on the humans standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Distinguished council members, Diego began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The void swarm approaching our borders isn't just another hostile species. It's an evolutionary challenge that our standard tactics cannot meet. High Counselor Zenith, a being of pure energy contained within an advanced quantum field, pulsed with concern. Your species has been part of the Galactic Defense Force for barely a decade, Officer Montoya. What insight could you offer that our strategic AIs haven't already calculated? Diego smiled, activating a holographic display that showed the void swarm's attack patterns. Something your AIs might have missed because they're too evolved to see it. Sometimes the most powerful solutions come from what you might consider primitive thinking. The display shifted to show previous encounters with the swarm. Battles where the most advanced fleet formations and targeting systems had failed against the seemingly chaotic movements of the biological hive ships. We've been approaching this wrong, Diego explained. We've been treating the void swarm like a military force, trying to counter their tactics with superior technology and precision. But they're not soldiers, they're predators. And humanity knows predators better than most. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber as Diego brought up Earth's evolutionary history. For millions of years, our ancestors weren't the apex predators, we were prey. We survived not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we learned to think differently, to see patterns, to anticipate, to adapt. He highlighted various void swarm attack formations. Look at these patterns. They're not tactical formations, they're hunting behaviors. The same ones we've seen in Earth's pack predators. The same ones our ancestors faced and survived. Strategic Commander Vexther, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of doubt, spoke up. Are you suggesting we abandon our advanced combat systems in favor of prehistoric survival instincts? I'm suggesting we combine them, Diego countered. Your combat systems are perfect for fighting enemies that think like us, but the Void Swarm doesn't think, it hunts. We need to stop trying to outthink them and start outmaneuvering them like our ancestors did with Earth's apex predators. He pulled up new tactical simulations, showing fleet formations based on ancient human hunting strategies. These formations don't try to predict or control the swarm's movements. Instead, they create situations that trigger the swarm's predatory instincts, turning those instincts against them. The council chamber erupted in discussion as Diego's simulations showed success rates far higher than any previous tactical approach. High Counselor Zenith's energy form pulsed with intense light. This is unprecedented. You're suggesting we use our technological inferiority as an advantage. Not inferiority, Diego corrected. Different evolution, different perspective. Humanity spent millions of years learning to survive against superior predators. We learned to use fire before we understood combustion. We learned to track prey before we could write. These weren't primitive skills, they were sophisticated solutions born from necessity. He gestured to the display showing Earth's evolutionary timeline. Every species in this room evolved to be the apex predator of their world. But humans, we evolved to survive being prey. And then we evolved to become something else entirely, not the strongest predator, but the most adaptable survivor. The chamber's mood shifted as understanding dawned. The very traits that many advanced species had considered primitive, human instinct, intuition, and adaptability, were suddenly revealed as sophisticated evolutionary advantages. The Void Swarm is unlike anything we've faced, Diego concluded, because we've been looking at them through the lens of apex predators. But humanity? We know what it's like to be the underdog. We know how to turn disadvantage into advantage. And most importantly, we know that sometimes the best way to defeat a superior force isn't to overpower it, but to outsmart it. In the days that followed, Diego worked with the council to implement his new strategy. The combined fleet would use advanced technology not to overcome the swarm's hunting patterns, but to enhance their ability to exploit them. Human instinct and alien technology would work together, creating something entirely new. As the final preparations were made, High Counselor Zenith approached Diego in the tactical center. "Your species continues to surprise us, Officer Montoya. We thought we were accepting primitives into our alliance. Instead, we may have found the missing link in our own evolution." Diego looked up at the massive display showing their combined fleet moving into position. "That's the thing about evolution, Counselor. Sometimes the best adaptations don't look like advantages until you need them most. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our intelligence. It's our ability to turn our perceived weaknesses into strengths." The final battle with the Void Swarm would prove Diego right. The combined human-alien fleet, fighting with a strategy that merged advanced technology with primitive survival instincts, would achieve what countless purely technological solutions had failed to do. And in doing so, they would prove that in the grand game of evolution, humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't our technology, but our unique perspective on survival itself.